Princess, first of all, the first thing I'd like to find out from you was, what was it like growing up in a real palace in Thailand?
Well, I didn't appreciate it then, but I appreciate it very much now. And I suppose you've read the all the fairy tales and things like that at a prince. Well, my life was very similar. I've been asked many times what the life of a princess was, and I say was because I'm a Mrs. now. I said I didn't do anything. I had personal maids and I had everything done for me. I didn't like it. I didn't appreciate it very much. And I remember when I was a little girl, I used to go in and lock the bathroom door and wash clothes, you know. but right now, I'm planning to bring someone out if they will come, you know, to help me with the. I don't like housework at all. I think as you grow older, you just sort of go back to your old life. But it was wonderful, and in the morning I would wake up and I would read, and somebody would do my toenails, somebody would do my nails, and somebody would fix my hair, help me to dress, and I really did nothing. I think I read all day. And the food always came whenever I wanted it, and I don't think I did anything that was useful, or I just did nothing.
What about your grandfather? I know that you read quite a bit about your grandfather. Was he accurately portrayed in what we know as The King and I, or Anna and the King?
Well, let me say that I can't be the one to say anything really, because I never knew him. He died when my father was 7. However, I did get stories about him, which if I had known that he was going to be so famous in the United States, I would have asked my grandmother more. But see, when I was sent to England when I was 10 years old, and I stayed with the English family, so when I came back, I couldn't speak Thai, I couldn't remember Thai. So everybody in Thailand tried to translate, and one day my grandmother said something in English. You know, I was surprised, and I asked her, how can you speak English? So she told me about Anna. So that part is true, and my grandfather did hire her, but whether she was the one to teach him everything, or I doubt it. And I was told that he learned his English from a missionary, American missionary. And he really knew how to put her in her place, really. But the story of her being there, or even the story that they were interested in each other, the government denies it, but my father told me something else.
Now, you came to the United States, and you have learned to love the United States, and particularly the South. What made you like America, and what did you expect to find when you came to America after growing up as a Thai, but having lived in England?
Well, because I was brought up, I think the first, you know, from 10 to 14 are really the formative years. And I was really brought up as an English girl, in 100% English girl. So when I came to Thailand, the tradition, all things, I could never be alone, I could never have freedom, I could never... I became very uncomfortable and very unhappy, and always, every 6 months, I would dream that I was going back to England. So when I got married, I nagged my husband, I guess, so much. And then finally, he got to come to be financial attaché, and we had to choose whether we should go to England or America. At that time, my brother, I don't know when you heard, he was President of the United Nations Assembly in 1956, and then he became ambassador. So at that time, which was, he was ambassador, and I just felt, well, this America, I don't know what's like. I was a little afraid, to tell you the truth. But my brother was here, and it would be, you know, kind of comforting. So we chose America. And I just came, and I just fell in love with the people and the country, because, you see, in America, it's like England and Thailand together. And if you go to England, you have to be English. But in United States, you can be in United States and be a Thai, because America is freedom. And I think this is true freedom, because when I was a princess, or during the time of absolute monarchy, we didn't change from constitutional monarchy until 1932. And in the days of absolute monarchy, the royal family are very free. We could do anything we like. But later, after the change of government, we have to watch our P's and Q's, you know, because we didn't want to insult the new government and so forth. So I was very uncomfortable, and I had to change my way of behavior. And then when I'm in America, I'm very free, and I've been treated as a princess here. I feel more like a princess than I did in Thailand.
Once you got to America, how did you make it down to Troy State University?
Well, when I was brought in the second time after I went back in '49, I just loved this country. I wanted to come back. So I got Voice America to bring me out here, and I worked at Voice America. And in the Voice America, for publicity, you know, they have different files of famous Korean singer, ex-Russian general, and so forth, and I was one of them. And so each time they show the files, they would pick me. I was very lucky. And a magazine saw my picture and the caption, and they said, "You look interesting. Would you like to write a book?" To the publisher, that's Dutton. And I said, "I don't know how to write." And they say, "Well, talk with us." And one thing led to another, so I had a writer to write it. And then they suddenly become an author. Excuse me. So then when you're an author, then you automatically become a lecturer. So I had an agent in New York, and they assigned me here to Troy State to speak. Now, I didn't like to speak in universities because they're so learned people. And in those days, when I was young, you see, they say, "Why go to college? You know, you're rich, you're pretty, you get married, you be somebody, you don't have to work for your living." Because that's what they think. Only men should go to college. So because I didn't go to college, some people insult me and say, "Oh, you're not educated," and so forth.
No, I can't agree with that.
And so when I came here, I told that to President Adams. And Dr. Adams said, "Well, I'll set everything straight then." So he made me honorary president of Troy State, and that was it. And then I saw that the students, you see, I strongly believe that, especially for even in the United States, that the breeding has to go with the academic advances. And I saw how well-behaved students here. Of course, I was always partial to the South. I sent my youngest daughter, she got a scholarship to Virginia, to Tappahannock, about 40 miles from Richmond. And she graduated there, and she became a genteel Southern lady. And so when my grandson came here, I said, "Go to Troy," and he came. And suddenly my husband and I thought, well, we'd like to sort of semi-retire the rushing things and so forth. So I thought things are nicely run and not high-priced things, very people, but still real. So I brought him down, and he was caught. So he bought a house, and we came over. I've been very happy.
I think that's marvelous, and we're delighted to have you here. There's so many things that I'd like to talk with you about, but unfortunately our time has come and gone. But I think that we'll probably be coming back, and we can talk more about politics. We can talk about the Voice of America experience you had, your brothers and sisters, and
So then can I say one thing?
certainly.
You know, today is really my pleasure. You didn't know that I was a fan of yours, did you?
Oh, well,
And you, listen, when I lived in the suburb of Chicago, I tuned in CBS. And now I've switched to NBC. No, I really mean that.
we certainly
I think you
appreciate
do a
that.
wonderful job.
Thank you very much. And it's been our pleasure to talk with you. And as we said, we'll probably be back to pick this thing up and do some more at a later date for another program. And we thank you for taking your time to talk with us.
And I thank you for inviting me.
We go to the walking wheel, or the great wheel, and it's fastened onto the thread and then is pulled out. You measure your thread. When it reaches 40 turns, pop goes the weasel. There is a little game the children play that goes, pop goes the weasel. All around the mulberry bush, the monkey chased the weasel. The weasel stopped to pull up his sock. Pop goes the weasel. A penny for a spool of thread, a penny for a needle. That is where my money goes. Pop goes the weasel.
And this actually does pop.
It pops off at 40 turns, which is 80 yards of thread. You keep turning till you get 7 pops, and that gives you a skein. A skein is 560 yards, enough thread to make 1 yard of cloth, 1 yard wide on the loom. And this wheel is the smallest of all the wheels made and is called a visiting wheel because you can take it with you when you go visiting. Or it's called a gossip wheel because actually a great deal of gossip can happen over this little wheel. I took courses in a college in northwest Arkansas while I was teaching. I was head of the art department, and they had a weaving department. It's at the foot of the Ozarks, and the weavers lived all in the Ozarks.
What kind of pattern is this?
This is a colonial pattern, like the coverlets, and it's called honeysuckle.
I bet you weave all kinds of things.
Well, I make out here only this small pieces because the loom is not threaded for larger pieces, but I make pillow tops and hangings and bags and that kind of thing.
What kind of loom is this? This is an old one, isn't it?
Well, it's called a colonial loom, and they were found in the homes of people who needed a little extra money. They could weave for as much as $15 a month for people who would bring in their thread. Everybody did spinning, but only certain people did weaving, and usually the middle-class people who needed a little extra money.
How often do you come out here to the museum to weave?
I weave every Sunday afternoon from 1 to 5. And on calls, when they call me for school children and groups.
What do you do with the things you weave?
They sell before I get them off the loom, usually, or
You have orders?
people come by and want them, or they'll order a piece, and the money all goes back into the museum.
I'd have two reactions to the Carter, to the administration's economic program. In terms of much of the substance of the program, I would have really very little quarrel. Now, I think the basic problem that the President has created for himself is that it has been developed and managed in such a way that it's created unnecessary uncertainties. For example, the fiscal program early in the year included a tax rebate, and then it was withdrawn. And then it included an energy program, which I would regard, by the way, as one of the poorest elements in the president's program. I think that was a very poor program. And it was poor, by the way, importantly, because he did not listen to his own economic advisors. Now we've had the uncertainty of the promise of a major tax reform, which has to mean there are going to be major changes, but people don't know what the changes are. And that's creating another overhang of uncertainty, you know. So that my concern is not so much with the substance of what he has done. I think it could have been managed in a way which would minimize these uncertainties that leave people not quite sure how to plan.
In your watching the president's performance in the last 9 months that he's been in office, is he a good economist? Is he surrounded by the kinds of people you think could give him the best kind of advice?
I think he's surrounded by, I think his economic team by and large has been very good. I know most of them. Charlie Schultz, who is the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, used to work for me. Mike Blumenthal, who is the Secretary of the Treasury, moved there from Ann Arbor. And Dick Cooper, who's the Undersecretary of State for Economic Affairs, a professor of economics at Yale, and so forth. These are good men. They're all good men. They're able men. They're well trained. Now, is the president himself an economist? No. Most presidents are not. In fact, I don't know offhand of one that was. And of course, a president can't be an expert on anything. What is important for the president is to make sure that he can listen to the right people, you know, listen to good people, and soak up the advice that he gets, and finally he has to make his own decision.
Is it your opinion that he is a good listener and that he takes the advice and uses it to its maximum?
Well, now there I have had no personal contact with him, so I don't know. My impression is that he does seem to pay attention to his economics team, though I think there was a notable lapse in regard, in that respect, with the energy program. And of course, the president's paid very dearly for that.
On another note, in another area, Dr. McCracken, what impact has the Arab oil boom and all of these petrodollars that these people have, what impact has that had on the economy of this country in terms of real estate, buying into corporations? What impact has that had in the last couple of years, and what do you see 10 years from now?
Well, the major adverse impact of the sharp jump in the price of oil, I suppose, has been the upward pressure it created on our own rate of inflation. I think economists generally underestimated at the time what the impact of that was going to be. It has not been the only factor, possibly not even the major factor in the rate of inflation in recent years, but it was made a significant contribution. Now, the Arab countries who have been receiving the payments that we're making, at the outset, were very cautious about what they were going to do with their money. They heavily put the money in bank deposits, and in other words, they invested it, well, with super cautiousness. More recently, they've been going on out into more longer-term types of investment, and stocks, bonds, some real estate, and that sort of thing. But I think there has been an image on the part of some people that, my word, they're just going to wind up buying a General Motors today and probably IBM tomorrow, and in a few years they'll wind up owning the nation. That's not going to happen. Their Surplus, current so-called current account surplus amounts to something like $40 billion a year. Not all of that is put here. So you start to get the figure down to a figure which in a $1,900 billion economy is pretty small.
This means we're just letting the public be aware that we are unsatisfied with the negotiations as they are now. The contract, we've been working with a contract that has expired back in July. We've tried to bargain with the agency. Every time we go into negotiations, they back off from the table. They're not given an inch. And it's just unfair to the controllers.
What are you bargaining for?
Equipment, more staffing, national bidding. Basically, this is it. And developmental controllers are working FPL positions, which is not really the best situation in air traffic.
Do you think that the lack of staff that you have it could affect the safety of aircraft that are using airports?
With staffing being short, it could be a consideration, yes.
How long do you plan to picket?
We're picketing today, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
What about wages? What about job conditions? What are you asking for in this area?
We cannot negotiate salary. It all comes from Congress, and we fall under the civil service. So we are governed by the federal government. We don't have bargaining as far as salary is concerned.
So then it's basically then working conditions. It has nothing to do with salary structure at all.
There's no salary structure involved at all. It's strictly working conditions, equipment, and staffing, basically.
Fagan says that if the 3 days of informational picketing by the air traffic controllers do not bring the desired results, they could be back here sometime before Christmas. From Danley Field, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Dean, what is the situation now with child abuse? 10 years ago it was an epidemic. What is it now?
Well, what I think is happening here is that the people are learning more about it. It's visible, they're reporting better. If it was an epidemic then, it's an epidemic plus because we know more about it. And what's interesting about this conference is we're bringing together people who are directly involved in it, the physician, the social worker, the judge, the administrator, the teacher, the junior league organizations. These are all people who are quite concerned with it, and I think the movement toward understanding and preventing it in the long run might be the goal. It's a long, hard road, but we need to work on it.
Much of the research on child abuse indicates that children who were abused themselves tend to be parents who abuse their children. It seems to be a snowballing kind of thing. Are we seeing that in these tremendously increasing reporting figures now? Is this the answer to that?
Well, it's hard to say, but, you know, anyone that has an experience of anything tends to look at it, maybe repeats it. I think our problem here is that the child that's wanted in his family, that he's wanted and cared for, one of the big places to begin with. Families need help. Families who bear children who sometimes don't want them, but learn to work with them and respect them. It gets all back to who works with the family, who understands them, can they go places where they could have help in counseling and understanding. It's a problem that involves all these people that are at this conference.
How would you define child abuse?
Well,
Most people think of it as a physical
No,
abuse.
it's more than physical. It could be, it has, you know, when child's denied nutrition of certain kinds and he He develops all types of skin diseases because of lack of nutrition. That's a form of abuse. Psychological abuse. There's sexual abuse. There's things that you deny the normal child as he grows in food, in health, in teaching. The child that refuses to send his child to school, you know, that we in our society think a child should learn. And you not only learn at home and in community, but in school. And there's a lot of abuse along the school room and the school playgrounds that needs attention oftentimes.
Besides requests or thought given by attorneys, law enforcement people, some judges as far as in regards to clarification dealing with burglary, are you getting any other points of, I use the word criticism as far as the new code is concerned?
I think there have been some questions raised, and interestingly enough, we've had quite a few discussions, informal or formal, with news media and groups, and most of them have finally understood and realized there's really no serious problem. In fact, the Continuing Legal Education, which is an Alabama bar agency, are having a series of seminars all over the state of Alabama explaining this new code, which is necessary and desirable. We recently had a meeting at Birmingham, over 250 lawyers alone, and the same sort of question came up. And I think it's fair to say that most everyone really understood when we got through talking and explaining it that there was no serious problem. I think that the matter is brought out this morning here at this pre-session meeting of the legislature that we can do some cosmetic work to improve, not only in this area but in others. As I pointed out then, I think the legislature might want to go back and increase the penalty for some types of burglary that formerly were in there. I think there's some language used that could be restated to make it a little clearer. And I think that's done. I don't see that there's any real problem.
Hold that off until we get some further information. Third item, Mr. Miller?
31%. That's during the 15-day period first of charges.
It does not.
September sometime, then it took us 30 days for this procedure, about a year ago maybe. This is customary procedure we bring them. And most of them, of course, were moved out.
I disagree because the tenant council thus far has not had input to the board. The tenant council has acted directly under the project managers, and they hold the meetings in the various projects. What I'm looking for is a broader base. The HUD management study that was done recently criticized the lack of communication from administrative level, board level on down. So that was one effort to try to have a clear line of communication between the tenants. And I'm in disagreement with some of our city officials who feel that people who live in public housing and people of low income brackets are not able to make decisions and have input into the governmental process. I think they're just as capable as some of these big landowners and real estate people that we think can run public housing in some of the other areas.
And completed last August, and also put in our budget. And remember, there was a committee appointed by the...
Any effort that any of us may make to further the communication or to better the communication between any of us, residents, authority staff, and board members or whatever, I think would be a move in the right direction. I sure do.
Do you think that right now you are getting enough feedback from your residents?
The resident council in each project meets on a monthly basis. Most of the time, there's someone from the housing authority that attends these meetings, represents the authority. Now, I do not believe that we have informed the resident councils of the board meeting now that in the evening so that they may attend these meetings if they see fit. I don't believe an effort has been made. However, that might have been. Most of that's done on a project level. The project manager whoever is in charge of that project, he works or she works very close with the council, and they could have been informed. I'm not sure of that.
But under current conditions, do you feel like you are getting the sufficient feedback that you need to properly operate the housing authority?
In my opinion, yes, but I will have to say again that any effort that any of us could make to broaden or lengthen the lines of communication between the resident body and the authority staff and the Board of Commissioners, in my opinion, would be a move in the right direction.
We'll hold that off until we get some further information. Third item, Mr. Miller.
We need a resolution of writing off our old accounts, and while I'm handing them out,
We're not sure that August was a typical month to use as a base, but in the absence of any other reference figure,
we're willing to sacrifice that in order for the people in Columbus to be receptive to. It calls for me to furnish them a site that would be practical for shooting a 10-minute chase scene, the contract we're dealing in right now, to furnish them with a site to, like I say, to shoot this 10-minute chase scene. It would involve some destruction of buildings, some fires, and what have you.
And you would like to provide them with Jackson Heights, is that correct?
Yes,
You have run into difficulties right now, is that correct?
Well, the difficulty that we have now is convincing the area residents how it would stimulate their economy and bring jobs into the community.
How do you plan to go about doing that, from what you understand?
We have a tentative meeting set up with the board members of the Montgomery Housing Authority to discuss and maybe get their support in talking with the area residents.
You have said, I believe, that if you are able to use Jackson Heights, if Warner Brothers is able to use that as a filming site, that you would be willing to demolish what's left of Jackson Heights for free. Is that correct?
Right. No, we would tear down the remainder of the buildings and clean up the site in accordance with our general specifications of the contract of which we were low bid.
What happens if you are not able to use Jackson Heights? If you have to go to an alternate site, do you plan to still tear down Jackson Heights free to the city?
I don't think at this point that would fit into our operation. We're willing to sacrifice that in order
for the people in Columbus to be receptive to having their site.
Oh yes, we have a real good relation with. At that time, I don't know what kind of complications have developed since then.
From the looks of it, holiday driving in Alabama may cost a little less. A WSFA spot check of Montgomery's retail gas dealers shows that in many cases, prices have dropped a penny since last month. Several pace-setting off-brand self-service stations are showing regular gas at $55.9 a gallon, compared to $56.9 in October. Again, there's a wide variety of brands and prices to choose from. $55.9 was the lowest price and could be found at off-brand stations all over town. Most name-brand self-service dealers are charging $56.9 or $57.9, though some aren't shy about charging as much as $60.9. If you're in the mood for even higher prices, a visit to some full-service stations will satisfy your urge. Prices on regular gas are going as high as $67.9 if you don't want to pump it yourself. But despite some relatively steep prices, it seems that the gasoline business in Montgomery isn't suffering, nor is the Alabama vacationer. It appears that the price of gas is going to have to climb even more before those with a hankering for the highway start looking for other alternatives. Bill Weaver, WSFA TV News.
A bill in the legislature of Alabama to prohibit the mayor, city officials in the city of Montgomery from dismissing, harassing, suspending, or intimidating any city employee who refused to work on a legal holiday that has been designated by the city of Montgomery as a legal holiday. And the reason I'm doing this is for the protection of the sanitation workers here in the city of Montgomery. The bill will cover all city employees except police officers and firemen. Those individuals are involved with public safety. And of course, I expect to get the bill passed through the state legislature, and I'm going to make it retroactive back to September the 1st. Now, Mayor Former has been raising a lot of saying about the city sanitation workers not coming to work on a holiday. Well, to my knowledge, the sanitation workers do not pick up garbage on holidays anyway. At least they do not do it in the black neighborhoods. To my knowledge, all of my life, I never have known garbage being picked up on Thanksgiving Day and Christmas holidays and other holidays that are observed by the city and the state of Alabama.
With mercy.
Sam Taylor.
Solemnly swear.
Solemnly swear.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States to enter.
Upon which I am about to enter.
To the best of my ability.
To the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. Comments themselves. I do generally know the difference between a circuit judge and a district judge by the color of their hair. There's a certain amount of dignity that a judge should have when he rules on cases that are really important. And we think that it adds some degree of solemnness to judicial proceedings that are important to a person's life and property. And not that we want to be overly robed or anything like that, but to be sober and somber. And I think it adds something to the dignity of the proceeding.
Since he lost his $1 million yacht in January of this year, New Orleans businessman Charles Slater says he's never been satisfied with the government's search for his boat, and so the hearings here in New Orleans.
Be substantiated. Heroin from Southeast Asia, cocaine from Colombia, and marijuana from... Indeed, a few confirmed hijacking in order to facilitate the distinction of a...
Mobile, Alabama, and New Orleans. We have some information in our files to indicate that in fact a vessel which was transiting the area on that specific date did hear a distress call from the Flying Dutchman, and concludes that the vessel sank. The only reason I have not put this into the category of a possible sinking is that we have no concrete specific debris from the vessel. But I would say that that one is marginal possible hijacking. It probably should be a possible sinking. The Pirates Lady would be...
For the Pirates Lady departure from Apalachicola, some 200 miles to the north. The possibility of connection, we have knowledge or have information to indicate that the gunsmoker was in fact in the Apalachicola sometime
importing drugs from South America. The rewards are certainly present, and the risk of capture.
These hearings have revealed several things. Number one, the Coast Guard was not equipped with machines or men or money to deal with the problems of boat thefts, drug smuggling, or hijackings. And it appears that there may be some new action because of new programs. But the Coast Guard spokesmen say the new programs that they have launched to ward off all of these problems in the Gulf of Mexico are new, and they won't know how effective they are for several months. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News, New Orleans.
Tall and tan and warm and Fatima goes walking and when she passes it, oh she passes goes. Dweddle, 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 tall and slender Fatima goes walking and when she passes it, oh she passes goes.
Dance for, give me somebody to show